So what was the reaction to Sir David Amess's murder? Well, it was bizarre in some ways. You had this statement from Sadiq Khan on Twitter: "I am so deeply, deeply saddened by the tragic news Sir David has passed away. He loved being an MP and was a great public servant. Just awful. My thoughts and prayers for all those Londoners are with David's loved ones at this time of unimaginable grief." Passed away. As if he
in his sleep?
Yeah, as if he died in his sleep and wasn't murdered in a church.
I mean,
you can compare this.
I don't know what to be saying of that.
Well, deeply understating this situation is what Sadiq Khan is doing here. He didn't do that with the murder of Joe Cox. He said, well, literally our murdered friend Joe Cox, the Labour MP who was killed, or the Conservative MP who was killed who just passed away. It's very, very interesting how you see this kind of bias on display. Anyway, so Jeremy Corbyn had an interesting statement as well. "My deepest condolences to David Amess's friends, family and loved ones. I'm very sorry for them all." But no particular sympathy for David Amess there. His friends, his families, his loved ones, but not tragic for him personally. Just odd. Just odd framing. And then you get Angela Rayner's response, the Labour deputy leader. She says, "I'm horrified by the reports regarding David Amess and an incident in his constituency surgery today. We don't know all the details yet, but on behalf of all of us in the Labour Party, I want to say all of our thoughts are with David, and we hope he pulls through and is okay." And this is before, of course, it was confirmed that he had died. And that's very interesting because literally weeks earlier, Angela Rayner was calling all of the Conservatives scum. Her words were, "We cannot get any worse than a bunch of scum, homophobic, racist, misogynistic, absolutely vile, Banana Republic, vile, nasty, Etonian piece of scum." And then apparently that was her holding back. And when challenged on this and given a dressing down by Keir Starmer, she just stood by her words. We get the next one. She stands by it. Nope, Tories are scum, and that's all they are. "Oh, one's been stabbed. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear this. I'm horrified. This is terrible. This is tragic. We hope the scum pulls through." Starting to really hate the Labour Party at this point. Anyway, so this led the people to point out, well, hang on a second, it seems to be the Labour Party itself that's been calling Tories scum for ages. I mean, this is a 2015 video from Owen Jones. They've been doing this for literally years and years. They've been calling the Conservative scum. And so I watched this video, and it's interesting. He's like, well, I'm not going to say scum because I think it makes me look bad, but I'm going to support you in your right to do it, and I'm going to promote you when you do. It's like, okay.
At the same conference, in case you're wondering, where she said the Tories were scum, there was another speaker who referred to the Tories as rodent Tories. So this is very, very typical.
The general dehumanization and demonization of Conservatives is a long-standing trope in the Labour Party. They've been doing it for a long time.
Tradition.
A tradition, if we can say it. And so you end up getting some quite psychotic Labour responses, like one of these chaps. Go to the next one, John. This is a video of some guy committing a crime, and so we're not going to play it just in case we end up implicated in that, but he basically says, "I'm glad MPs are getting a blade in them."
That's a crime in the UK.
Yeah.
So for people who might not know, in response to Joe Cox being assassinated by a guy who shouted Britain's first and therefore is perceived as a far-right terrorist, National Action, the far-right organisation, decided to tweet out, 649 to go, in a similar way to celebrating the attack.
Yeah.
And as a result, they're on the prescription list.
Yeah.
Meaning it's illegal to be a member or voice support for that organisation.
Yeah.
And, well, that's exactly what this chap is doing.
Keir Starmer, of course, was a lot more reasonable in this, as you would expect. He went with Boris Johnson to pay his respects and put flowers down. But let's be fair, Keir, it's time to purge those people who use the term Tory scum, isn't it? You know, this would be called by them stochastic terrorism, creating an environment in which it's acceptable and it's increasing the likelihood that these kind of random attacks are going to happen. This kind of divide is just simply not appropriate. And you can see this from other members of the Labour Party, such as a Labour peer. I'm using, if we can go to the next one, it's the Guardian live reporting, so you probably can't get it up on the screen, but I went through it at the time. So a Labour peer has called for all major opposition parties to stand aside in the Southend West by-election out of respect for Sir David Amess, so the Conservatives will be able to elect another Conservative, which is I think, the honourable thing to do, and hard to believe that any of the Tory scum people really support, but none of them have been brave enough to voice their opposition to this yet.
It's also a tradition, because under Joe Cox's murder, the same happened, where they allowed a Labour MP to be elected unopposed.
That's correct.
The reason I mentioned the fact of National Action being made a criminal organisation is because it ties in with, as you're saying, his need to purge those who call Tory scum, because a lot of them are actually going to be on a terrorist list if they continue in such action.
Yeah. I mean, they are extremists.
Yeah, but I mean, they will literally be on the prescribed list if the law is equally applied.
Yes, they would. And so, Liberal Democrats and Labour are not going to be standing candidates in this by-election, so that's good. And a lot of Conservative MPs said basically they want to go on as usual. Now, many local mosques in the area have, of course, condemned the murder. Sadaver's murder was an indefensible atrocity committed on the grounds of a place of worship, and we condemn it in the strongest possible terms. This act committed in the name of blind hatred. We looked forward to the perpetrator being brought to justice. That's a very good statement, and I find it very interesting how they highlight that the murder was taken place on the grounds of a place of worship, whereas none of the other people involved in this seem to want to talk about that. He was murdered in a church, and he was a Catholic, so that seems to be important. You get the reasonable voices, such as Brendan O'Neill, who are like, right, okay, can we now have an honest discussion about Islamist terrorism? Because it turns out that he wasn't poor, he didn't have mental health problems, he was very well educated, this seems to have been ideological radicalization, we need to be able to talk about this. And he makes some very good points. But unfortunately, discussing the sort of actual rational worldview of these people is verboten, and we're not allowed to do that, so we'll just move on.
I also can't imagine the reverse taking place under Joe Cox's murder, of right-wingers being like, yeah, well, was he just poor? Like,
well, no, it would be absurd.
I mean, that never took place. I don't remember that taking place.
No, but this has neatly cut through all of the left-wing defences of jihadi terrorism. So thankfully they don't get to have a real say in this. But what has happened, if we can get to the next one, is the public discussion has been one of those like, well, we can't have a discussion about Islam because of racists. But I don't measure anything I do by what racists say.
Also, what race?
Yes. Well,
name the race.
Obviously.
The race of Islam.
Yeah, but let's play this clip.
Listen, Simon, you're right, actually. I am a little bit scared to go fully in on the Islamist aspect of this conversation. And I'll tell you why. Because Islamist is currently trending on Twitter, and I'd made the mistake of clicking on it. And so many racists coming out of the woodwork, tarring all Muslims with the same brush, saying that Muslims need to apologize for what happened yesterday, not taking into account that this is a tiny, minuscule proportion of what is, in fact, a very peaceful and loving community. So, no, I don't want to dog whistle the racists. And unfortunately, when you have that conversation, that's what happens.
So we can't talk about Islamization or Islamism, radical terror attacks, or the philosophy that underpins it because of Twitter racists.
There are people on Twitter.com that are racist. Therefore, we shall never have a discussion publicly about Islamism.
Yes.
As our MPs get murdered by Islamists.
Yeah.
You could go to Getter.com, lady, and maybe on there you won't find a bunch of racists, and therefore we can have the conversation. I mean, what a standard to determine whether or not you can even discuss something.
It's mad. And the fact that she's like, well, you are right. I'm afraid to discuss it. And the reason, because of these people, but you clearly have valid points. There's clearly something reasonable to talk about when it comes to radical Islam in this country and what it's doing to this country. And she is like, yeah, but racist. It's like, well, how many people have to be stabbed until that's more important than the racist?
Also, racist on Twitter.com.
Yeah, I don't
very
care.
Specific. Like, it gives a toss.
Why are you on Twitter.com?
Yeah. Go to Mumsnet.
Yeah, exactly.
There we are. They're not being racist, therefore we can have the conversation. I mean, what kind of standard is that?
Yeah, but the thing is that this is absolutely a problem that we need to talk about. Now, we can just look at the breakdown of people in jail for being terrorists to see that Muslims are massively and obscenely disproportionately represented. So this is the ethnicity and religion for terrorist and extremist prisoners for Great Britain. Britain being something in the region of 80% English or native British, and 73% of the prisoners are Muslim. 25% are Christian, 2% are Buddhist, 2% are Jewish, and 10% are atheist. And this means that, like, white, meaning English, is 32% of the prisoners, whereas Asian or Asian British are 46%. There's clearly, and that they make up about 6% of the population. So there's clearly a massive, massive problem with ideological radicalization in this community, but no one can talk about it because the racists.
I mean, the ethnicity aspect is not too interesting to me. The religion
Well,
one,
of course, but
the disparity is much larger.
Yes.
Like 73%. I mean, what percent of Britain is purportedly Muslim? I think in 2011 it was 8%, something like that.
Not even, I think.
I'm over-exaggerating there.
Like it was something like 4%.
And yet, 73% of the prisoners for religious extremism.
Yeah. And I agree, the ethnicity isn't very important. It's the ideology here. But
I also want to know who those two Jews are and the two Buddhists. I mean, God knows what they're in.
well, it's yeah. Sorry, it was 2, not 2%. That's right. But anyway, the point is, there's a problem that needs to be spoken about, and no one's prepared to do it. And as you posted on twitter.com earlier, this means that refugees making up 0.6% of the population are 20% of the terrorists.
Yeah, since 2010.
Since 2010. And so it's not that, because the common narrative is, it's just the children of refugees doing this. No, that's not true. A lot of them themselves are refugees. So don't know what to tell you there.
I didn't even include, for example, I mean, there are more in there you could include under that banner. I mean, take the Manchester bomber, for example. He's a child of a refugee family, came from Libya. Don't need to include him, and you still get 20%. So it's more than 20%,
right?
If we're being broader about it.
Yeah. And anyway, moving on, because what are we going to say? The borders are open. Literally 1,000 refugees are arriving on our shores every day illegally, and I'm sure that nothing bad will come of that.
I mean, the clip here being Tom Harwood arguing, even if a single migrant boat had made it across the channel this year, then the act of terrorism would have still taken place. You were going to eat those words in 10 years, Mr. Harwood, because, of course, one of them may turn out to be a terrorist, and then what?
Well, inevitably will do, the rate things are going. But anyway, let's get to some of the race grifters. Let's get to Dr. Shola, my favourite anti-British activist, who tweeted, Islamist, Somali in origin, Muslim migrant, African appearance, extremist links, terrorist. Predictably, references to the murder suspect of Sir David Amess include everything except British. No, people have been calling him a British national.
A lot of people have been pretty strict on the idea that he's just a British national.
Yeah, but I mean, what does British national even mean? It means holder of a British passport. You give out hundreds of thousands of these each year. It means nothing. It just means legally allowed to live here. Anyway, Calvin Robinson replied to this and pointed out, no, they are all using the term British national. Even the Daily Mail is using the term British national. The problems are, deep-seated and rooted in multiculturalism, because multiculturalism is not the same as multiracialism. As he says, a multiracial society could thrive, a multicultural society is doomed, because mass immigration doesn't work if there is no time for integration, and he's right. But even then, there's a problem with integrated people becoming ideologically radicalized. Anyway, so The Guardian decided, you know what? Whenever a Muslim extremist stabs a Catholic in a church, Muslims are most affected, obviously. Britain's leading Muslim organisation is issuing new guidance to help British Somalis and other individuals and mosques deal with any instance of hatred in the aftermath of Sir David Amess's death. That's right. Muslim community most affected.
I mean, that headline there. UK Muslim groups brace for rise in hate crime following the killing of David Amess.
Oh, no. No. It's just...
Right, okay. Not really. I mean, I was playing it before. Someone sent me it, which is the Norm MacDonald joke, which is like, so I've got a friend in the FBI that's very concerned. So their biggest fear in the FBI is that a Muslim extremist gets a hold of a dirty bomb and sets it off in somewhere like New York, killing millions and millions of people. Because the blowback against the Muslim community and innocent Muslims would be immense.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's literally what we're at here.
Yes. I mean, the joke comes into reality every single time.
This is a heinous crime and we utterly condemn it, of course. Nobody in the local Muslim community could believe how anyone could brutally murder anyone, never mind Sir David. Really? How could you imagine someone from the Muslim community brutally murdering someone?
It's not like it's happened multiple times in this country and our neighbours.
No, not like it happens all over Europe. But she added there was definitely an apprehension for Muslim communities at this time. Oh, well. Our own social media has been rife with hatred.
Again, could you imagine this in reverse?
No. I can't imagine this at all.
Take the Darren Osborne terrorist attack where he drove his van into a bunch of innocent Muslims outside a mosque.
Yep.
And then the response being, well, will someone please think of the non-Muslim community in this time?
Yeah.
Don't you know the British community is suffering because people dislike Darren Osborne and therefore white people in general or something?
They're going to be calling all British people reflective of Darren Osborne.
Rise in hate crimes against the white British population. That's the real problem here. Not that he drove a van into a bunch of people.
It's totally inappropriate. But anyway, so let's get on to Pretty Patel's statement, which I found very, very lackluster. Now, this statement was put out fairly swiftly after Amess's death, so there is the argument that, well, maybe she's not trying to politic, and that's fair. But the thing is, she's followed this up with other statements that are basically in the same vein. She says, acts like this are absolutely wrong, and we cannot let that get in the way of a functioning democracy. All measures being put into place for the security of MPs so they can carry on with their duties as elected democratic members. We live in an open society, a democracy. We cannot be cowed by any individual to stop us from functioning to serve our elected democracy. So, leaning very heavily on the democratic rhetoric, no mention of his motivation, and it's assumed that he is not part of a larger pattern of behavior from networks of actors, as in no individual can stop us from doing this. It's like, sure, the problem isn't the individual here. The problem is a network of radical extremists who operate in this country. For example, why is Anjem Chowdhury in this country? He's a convicted Islamist terrorist. Deport. What is he still doing here?
He's not the only one either.
No, he's not. This other guy from the Islamic State, he's now here. Why is he here? Deport.
The Reading stabber. He was convicted of 6 violent crimes, sent to prison, should have been deported back to Libya immediately,
Yep.
and or Tunis or whoever else, and instead they just went, no, we'll just let him free, and then he went on to stab 3 people in a park and murder them, and 3 others and critically
Weren't they
injured them.
gay as well?
Yeah, it was a homophobic
Yeah,
attack.
he was specifically targeting gays because there's probably something in the Quran about gays, the people of Lut.
Yeah. But
Any
no, this
thoughts on them? I wonder what Mohammed thought about those.
is an attack by an individual or democracy.
Exactly.
No, it's an attack by a movement that is global
Yes.
and hates Western norms and democracy.
Yes. And that's not all Muslims. That is a very small subsection of Muslims who are ideologically committed to overthrowing the West. People like Anjem Chowdhury and all the other people we've mentioned. They can just be deported. I mean, they should be deported. But anyway, so another Conservative MP went on GB News and decided that this was he informed us that this was going to be the focus of the Conservative Party in the wake of this tragedy. Let's play the clip.
Well, I think it is social media that has made it so much worse. And I think particularly for women, it's made it really, truly terrible. And we've seen this from what some of my colleagues on both sides of the House have said in recent days. I think the government are looking at the argument for removing anonymity. And it is clear that people are prepared to say things online which they would never say if they were face to face. So I think change needs to come, and anonymity being granted to people online, I think, is one of the changes that we should be looking at.
David Amess was killed by mean tweets.
No, anonymous mean tweets.
No, he was stabbed to death.
Yeah. I mean, if he was going to say social media, maybe, but it seems to have been watching YouTube videos in lockdown that radicalized him, from the best information we have at the moment. It wasn't him having an anonymous Twitter account.
I can't get over how that's the response. That's the response to the Conservatives. All the things you could have done in response, you're like, yeah, well, people sending me tweets. Like, why do you even care about that?
How do you think that's connected to what happened to David Amess?
No evidence.
But Priti Patel ran with this and said, well, yeah, what we're going to do is just basically remove online anonymity, or we're considering it, because apparently we can't carry on like this. So social media users could face a ban on anonymous accounts, says Priti Patel, because she's stepping up to take action against radicalization in the wake of the murder of Sir David Amess. What was the proof that anonymous accounts are radicalizing anything?
It's nothing. Literally nada. You remember the first time she actually floated this was in response to the murder of Sarah Everard?
Yeah.
She was like, so if we ban anonymous Twitter accounts, they'll solve it. And everyone was like, shut up, you idiot.
Yeah, what's your obsession with banning anonymous Twitter accounts, for a start?
I don't know. Is a cup going to fall over in a house? And she's like, that's it, ban anonymous Twitter accounts.
Exactly. So police questioning Ali on suspicion of terrorism offences are understood to be investigating the possibility he was radicalised by material found on the internet and social media networks. Okay, but nothing to do with anonymisation. Anyway, so Diane Abbott, who receives more online abuse than any other MP, gave her backing to legislation forcing tech giants to reveal the identity of those who peddle hate on their platforms. What's that got to do with this?
It's just nothing.
She told The Independent that police investigators into racial abuse and threats against her have repeatedly floundered because of social media companies' insistence on protecting anonymity. Sorry, what?
What is this conversation?
Yeah.
What has this got to do with the Islamist who murdered the MP? Don't you know Diane Abbott gets mean tweets?
I mean, literally,
Yes.
the mosques in his constituency were like, yes, this is wrong that he was murdered and murdered within a church. And you're like, yeah, sir, that anonymous social media account. So
Diane Abbott.
the Islamists are fighting a religious war. I mean, we call them jihadis because they're on a jihad, which is a religious war. If you don't understand that, then you don't understand what's going on here, do you? Anyway, so Priti Patel said that many MPs have suffered appalling online attacks and warned we can't carry on like this.
Yeah, David Amos was stabbed to death.
On Twitter. We should know who's putting up things on social media. We should know the person behind these fake accounts. Offshore accounts are being used for threats and intimidation, said Sir Lindsay Hoyle, the Speaker of the House of Commons. Wasn't someone stabbed in a constituency surgery?
I mean, we have like David Amos stabbed to death. We have Joe Cox shot to death. We have the other chap, Thomas Timms.
Timms, yeah.
Who was
Stephen
stabbed.
Timms, I think was, sorry.
Sorry, Stephen Timms, who was stabbed.
Yeah.
None of them have anything to do with online anonymity.
No, not even slightly. But of course, Lisa Nandy was like, well, hang on a second. I don't really feel safe doing my job in my constituency. And Priti Patel was presumably like, is it all the mean tweets? And she was like, no, it was the stabbing. But she was like...
Sorry, that's the Home Secretary.
Yeah.
The Home Secretary's
Yeah.
like, oh, you know what the real priority
And she's
is.
normally quite good on most subjects as well, which is really weird how she's dropping the ball on this.
Often these days.
I know. So Priti Patel was like, oh, yeah, well, we will offer more routine police presence at surgeries and other events in constituencies. And she was open to the introduction of airport-style metal detectors. So, okay, fine, don't care. Dominic Raab came out on Kay Burley with Sky News, was just like, yeah, online hate we get is out of control. The vile abuse aimed at MPs has to stop. I don't think I'd put a man being stabbed to death by a jihadi as vile online abuse. I think there's a slight distinction to be made there. And then the BBC started putting out articles against online anonymity. Mariana Spring, the BBC's specialist disinformation reporter, which is an amazing title. Like, literally, she reports the disinformation. Online abuse against women is on the rise, but why aren't the police, government, and social media companies doing more to stop it? So when a Christian Conservative MP is stabbed by a Somalian jihadi, women are most affected.
Have you thought of the women?
Well, this whole article is actually quite a long article, and it's constantly going on about online and anonymous online abuse against women. It's like, there's nothing to do with any of this.
Who was stabbed to death?
It's wild.
I love how you can see the entire establishment getting behind
And
it.
it's her like going. It's people who have said things to her that she didn't like, so she's like investigating them and ringing them up and saying, "Why do you do that?" And he's like, "Oh wow, you were annoying me," And it's absurd, right? And anyway, so the point being that this, if we can actually bring it back to Mr. Ali, we can expect more bedroom radicals conducting terror attacks in the near future. Don't know if there's anything to do with their online anonymous accounts. But
I love
Britain's,
how you're like, yeah, can we bring it back to the terrorist incident? Home Secretary?
if that's important to you,
You got
at
time
all.
for that?
But again, like, it's one of those things. It's like, look, we're going to get police protection. It's okay. Well, the rest of us don't have that. What do we do?
What happens to I think it was, what was it, the Birmingham teacher?
Yeah.
Was it
Oh,
Birmingham?
no. Yeah, it was. Over the the image of the Prophet Muhammad that was shown
Yeah.
as blasphemy. Yes.
Like,
what
we
happens
just
to
go
him?
person to person to person and keep giving police protection.
Yeah. Anyway, so it turns out that British intelligence agencies have warned ministers of a potential new wave of terror attacks carried out by bedroom radicals bred during the lockdown. Oh, wow. An unexpected side effect of locking people in their homes is that a bunch of them become radicals. We're facing a threat from lone wolf terrorists who are radicalized after spending months online. And of course, this is not good, but it's something that's coming in the near future they're expecting. And so I don't think they're wrong. I don't think there's any reason to doubt that. Don't think it's connected to online anonymity. But the point is, we can't talk about this properly. There's going to be no advancing of a conversation against radical Islam. And therefore, this Conservative MP will just be one of those events that we pass over and move on with.
If you enjoyed that segment from the podcast The Lotus Eaters, you can watch the full thing at 1 p.m. every weekday at lotuseaters.com, or you can sign up to get access to all the premium content we have on the site.
Yeah, we've got loads of really good stuff. Every week we have a Contemplations and Epochs episode that goes up, and in the Contemplations we talk about just interesting things. And the Epochs episodes are probably my favorite because I love talking about history. This latest one is we're doing a bit of a series on the 100 Years' War and why England kept winning. And we've not finished it yet, and you're going to really enjoy the end of that one. But we've also got other excellent episodes that we do, like the book club. The most recent one was Shooting an Elephant by George Orwell. This was about his time in Burma as a colonial officer, and when he was tasked with the shooting of a rampaging elephant. And it's really, really interesting what the circumstance of the thing was. But we also have lots of other content, such as premium articles, which have audio tracks on them for our silver and gold subscribers. And we do premium podcasts about things that we don't really feel that we can put on YouTube or have done a particularly large amount of research into. And so it's worth keeping them slightly more private. And we also do lots of very interesting interviews, such as this one with comedian Steve Hughes, which was really fascinating because I didn't expect him to be a philosopher. But anyway.
Yeah. Also, the last thing to mention is the live event content we have. So we occasionally, when we get around to it, doing our live events, and the videos from them are on the website as premium, of course, because people came to see and paid. So go and check that out. This is on the worst of critical race theory.
Yes.
And I do mean the worst.
It's unconscionable.
Yeah. So if you'd like access to all that premium content, go to lotuseaters.com and subscribe. Thank you and goodbye.